Hi all, my name is Ryan and welcome to my channel What the Pop, where we discuss pop culture in general and Buffy a lot. So the usual spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Buffy at least once, I may talk about things in each episode that relate to future plot points. So if you don't like spoilers, I suggest you subscribe and come back after you've watched it all. Today we are looking at Season 1, Episode 4, Teacher's Pet. A quick episode description. Buffy's fighting and losing. Xander steps in and saves her. Epic guitar solo. It's a dream. Xander's drooling. Class about insects. Dr. Gregory thinks Buffy should be a better student and make Flutie eat her transcript. So of course a monster kills him. We meet Blaine, a parent stud with the ladies. Angel shows up, gives Buffy his jacket. We meet hot new substitute teacher Natalie French. Shoulder pads scream Predator. Cordelia discovers Dr. Gregory's Bobby. Buffy patrols, fights Vampire Wolverine. That vamp's scared of Miss French. Buffy's off to counselling. Late for class, Miss French goes all exorcist. The 180 head spin, not the puke. Xander gets roofied. She-mantises are virgin thieves. Xander wakes up in a cage next to Blaine. Go to Miss French's house. She's not there. Wrong Miss French. Track down Vampire Wolverine. Use him as a hound dog. Stake him. Go after She-mantis. Spray it with bug spray. Hit it with bat sonar sounds. Buffy did her homework. Hack it to bits with a machete. See Angel again. Keep the jacket. Seductive look. Oh boy. Next day at school, cue new teacher, pan to eggs left behind as they hatch. Now I want to start this analysis first by highlighting that this episode is one of the worst episodes of Buffy. It was early on in the series and the writers were still finding what worked, and this episode is a big misfire. While it has some moments, it's very much a formulaic Monster of the Week episode. The plot is poorly constructed and the theme is clumsy. It is not bad TV, it's mediocre, but it's saved by the stellar acting of the cast. But it is bad Buffy. With that in mind, let's start our analysis. Well, they've basically done this in every episode so far, and Giles and the Scoobies will consult the books so often it has become a drinking game. This episode explicitly states what it is that elevates Buffy, the research. She always has great background knowledge on her foe, provided by the Scoobies or her own research, preparing her for most of her encounters. As Dr. Gregory says, don't be sorry, be smart. A sentiment Buffy uses when she takes down the She-mantis. She does her homework, finds out that bat sonar sends their nervous system crazy, and uses it against the She-mantis. Before hacking it up with a machete, of course. On a side note, bat sonar does nothing to mantises besides warn them that a bat is coming. Mantids, like many insects, have evolved a special ear to hear bat sonar and react accordingly to avoid being eaten. Losing your virginity is a rite of passage that most of us go through sometime during our teenage years. In men, virginity is often regarded as a burden, something that is at best neutral and at worst stigmatizing and negative. When we see Blaine talking in the Bronze, he is boasting of how many women he has been with, even going so far as to embellish the number with a story of one he rejected because she wasn't his type. We see the negative stigma associated with being a virgin in this lie, and in Xander's response to his virginity being questioned. But as Xander says when he approaches Buffy and Willow, he doesn't say anything about virginity, he says his manhood was questioned. The implication being that Xander is not a man in the eyes of these guys because he is still a virgin. Now we've seen in previous episodes that Xander already is struggling with what it means to be a man. In the episode The Harvest, after they've identified where Luke came from and where Jesse may be being held, Xander says, "So what's the plan? We saddle up, right?" And Buffy replies, "There's no we, okay? I'm the Slayer and you're not." Xander says, "I knew you'd throw that back in my face." Buffy says, "Xander, this is deeply dangerous." Xander says, "I'm inadequate, that's fine. I'm less than a man." In this episode, he is still struggling with that notion. This is what fueled his fantasy dream at the start of the episode. Mocked for his virginity and eager to become a man, he ignores all the warning signs that Miss French is a predator. This episode reinforces that notion that virginity is a burden and something that men need to get rid of to become a man, as it is the reason Blaine and Xander are chosen as victims. If they weren't virgins, they would have been fine. We see this notion often in the way we view victims of statutory rape by teachers. Girls are nearly always seen as victims, whereas guys are seen as legends and given high fives. Both are victims, both suffer trauma, and males often suffer additional trauma due to the disparity of what they felt about the situation and the expectation and often glorified version in media that they were expected to feel. Now, I think the subtle message in this episode is actually for Buffy. While we get the overt message for Xander of the older predatory woman seducing the younger man for ill intent, this is reflected in the way Angel, an older and very attractive man, is seducing Buffy. Now, while his intentions aren't predatory, Buffy is every bit as inexperienced as Xander, and this serves as a warning that she should be a little bit more careful. We see that she's developing a teenage crush on Angel in their interaction in the Bronze when Angel gives Buffy his jacket that we then see her wearing to school the next day. And there is a certain irony in her wearing Angel's jacket while she's warning Xander that Miss French is probably a giant predatory insect. Later on, Angel tells her to keep the jacket, saying it looks better on her, a slow seductive look as he walks away. Given what we learn about Angel in a few episodes, and even further what happens between Buffy and Angel in Season 2, and the very real possibility of him feeding on her after they have sex, I think this episode was a secondary warning to the one we saw on the crate at the end of The Harvest, and to remind us that, despite what she's already been through, Buffy is still a young woman who has much to learn and a lot of maturing still to do. She has a whole life of experiences ahead of her. Now, this episode starts with Xander having a dream where he saves Buffy, kills the vampires, performs his guitar solo, and basically becomes a man, and has his hero moment. When in reality, he's sleeping in science class and drooling. Now, I will mention countless times in these first few seasons how much of a jealous douchebag Xander is over any guy that happens to enter Buffy's life. For example, in this episode, he sees Angel for the first time and has this jealousy-fueled exchange with Willow. Xander says, "Well, he's buff. She never said anything about him being buff." Willow says, "You think he's buff?" Xander replies, "He's a very attractive man. How come that never came up?" We see this jealousy on full display in relation to Owen in the next episode too. Now, in this episode, he accuses Buffy of being jealous, now that someone wants him, despite her showing no such jealousy at all, merely genuine concern for his safety. Now, this issue I have with Xander's crush on Buffy, apart from it making him a dick, is that it's shallow as all hell, based entirely on how Buffy looks and not on who she is. We know that he wanted her from the first moment he saw her. He tumbled off a skateboard staring after her, and on meeting her shortly after, the first words out of his lips were, "Can I have you?" So we know from his exchange that his love of Buffy is entirely fueled by his penis. Now, the fantasy he has at the start of this episode supports this notion, as the Buffy in this fantasy is none of the things that Buffy actually is. She's not weak, she's not defenseless or a damsel in distress. She has super strength, rapid healing, and kick-ass fighting skills. She's a goddamn superhero. Literally, the only thing his fantasy Buffy and actual Buffy share are the way they look. His fantasy Buffy is inferior to him in every way. Now, you compare his fantasy where he is the hero saving Buffy from the reality in this episode, where he ends up as the damsel in distress who needs saving. Buffy shows up, shows intelligence in using the bat sonar, skill in the fight, and strength in hacking it to pieces. None of which are attributes of Xander's fantasy Buffy. A couple of points of interest. One, Angel gives Buffy his leather jacket in this episode, and she will be seen wearing it in future episodes. This episode kicks off Xander always falling for monsters, and something that is referenced often throughout the seasons. It is revealed that Xander's middle name is Lavelle, which is embarrassing. The egg scene at the end of the episode are never seen or heard of again, an unresolved plot point. And my favourite quote in this episode actually comes from Principal Faludi. We all need help with our feelings, otherwise we bottle them up, and before you know it, powerful laxatives are involved. I really believe if we all reach out to one another, we can beat this thing. I'm always here if you need a hug, but not a real hug, because there's no touching. This school is sensitive to wrong touching. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this look into Buffy, please like, subscribe, and check out some other videos now. If you disagreed with anything I said, or think I missed anything of relevance in the episode, put it in the comments below. And I'll see you next time.